It inspired Steven Spielberg and George Lucas. It was the original Temple of Doom. Some say it was the first action movie, and at the time, it was the most expensive movie ever made. Today, it's been largely forgotten, but in 1938, one of the most massive Hollywood adventure films was filmed here. A movie called Gunga Din. Because of the epic scenery, this remote area of Eastern California, which is called the Alabama Hills, was often used to provide Hollywood movies with an exotic and dramatic filming location. Everything from sci-fi to countless westerns. So many movies were filmed here, and in fact continue to be filmed here, that the nearest town, Lone Pine, California, actually has an entire museum dedicated to the films made in this area. Now, while most modern audiences have never heard of Gunga Din, in its day it was such an epic film that it inspired generations of filmmakers and movies, everything from Indiana Jones to The Lord of the Rings and beyond. The story is set in colonial India in what is now Pakistan and Afghanistan, specifically the Khyber Pass, and it follows three sergeants battling the murderous Thuggee cult. And today, not only are we going to uncover the filming locations, we're going to rediscover the lost, original Temple of Doom. Oh my gosh, it's still here. Face parts of the temple with real stone.
This wasn't all just plaster.
No.
They made this out of real material.
But to get there, we're gonna have to follow the same path as the three heroes of the story and relive the tale of Gunga Din. The movie starts off with some native Indians destroying British telegraph poles, then pretending to be travelers and following British soldiers to the nearest town. Clearly, they're up to some kind of shady business. When they reach the town of Tantrapur, chaos ensues because it turns out that these humble travelers don't just destroy telegraph poles, they want to destroy people as well. The town of Tantrapur is cut off from the main British army. Nobody knows what's going on out there, and that's where our story really begins, when our three heroes, the three sergeants, Sergeants Cutter, Ballantyne, and McChesney, are dispatched from the main British outpost and sent to find out what's going on in Tantrapur. And this was the site of the village of Tantrapur. And although the backdrop may make it look impressive today, the set was just as impressive. It was gargantuan. Look at the size of it. There were multiple buildings spread out over 8 acres here. Buildings you could film inside and out. They really built an entire city out here in the middle of nowhere. Our three sergeants, who along with their accompaniment of native soldiers, first get their look at Tantrapur right here as they enter the town along this road. But as they make their way into Tantrapur, along with their horses, they didn't have Ford Broncos back in colonial India, they begin to notice something is a little weird. Tantrapur has been abandoned. Now, this valley where the set for Tantrapur was located is vast, much bigger than the town itself. But luckily, there are ways with lining up rocks in the background that you can pinpoint the exact location of all those buildings. And what's more, there are actually pieces of the construction left out here, believe it or not. My brother Seth is out here with me. Otherwise, I'd probably be getting the same eerie feeling that the three sergeants got walking into Tantrapur, which, like I said, they found totally abandoned. Not a soul to be seen. It's that classic Hollywood trope of entering the empty town. What could have happened here? What catastrophe has befallen the population? To watch their back, the British posted some guards, while the main party, including the sergeants, made their way through the town to the headquarters, to the telegraph office. And as impossible as it would seem to be to find the site of one small building in this vast open plain, by very carefully lining up these foreground hills with the mountains in the background, we were able to determine the position of the camera in this shot here where you see the telegraph office, and therefore we can know with pretty close certainty that the telegraph office was right about here. Moreover, look at this on the ground, scattered all throughout Tantrapur. There are all kinds of old vintage nails, pieces of old ceramic roof tiles or terracotta. I mean, sure, they could be from prop jars or even modern rubbish, but these chunks of concrete are 100% left over from the walls of Tantrapur. And the telegraph office here was at the back of the village, and past this spot, there are no more debris fields. We've spent a ridiculous overkill amount of time researching this and combing this area on multiple trips. And by studying carefully, my brother has managed to digitally reconstruct the town layout. And here where you see all the buildings, that's where you have the nails and the concrete everywhere. And beyond them, like I said, nothing. Anyway, back to the story. The three sergeants are in Tantrapur. And inside the telegraph office here, they find dinner on the table. It's cold. The British have vanished. All they could find in there is a mysterious axe in the wall. So the three sergeants begin to fan out and explore the rest of the abandoned town. Meanwhile, the native soldiers they brought with them are starting to fix the telegraph poles that stretch off towards the mountains back there. Because it's hard work, they call out, "Water! Bisti!" which means water boy. That's when the camera turns over here and we get our first look at the titular character, the water boy, Gunga Din himself. Gunga Din, played by Sam Jaffe, appears over the edge of this little rise here, ostensibly from the river down below, bringing water to all the thirsty soldiers. And it's absolutely incredible how you can make the background rocks line up perfectly in only one spot. So we know we're standing where the camera was, and we know Gunga Din, or the actor portraying him, was coming up out of this little ravine here that stood in for the river. We'll get to the river in a little while. And even though he's a lowly Bisti, he's sort of looked down upon by the white British soldiers, spoiler alert, Gunga Din himself is going to be very important to our story. Okay, so the Indians are repairing the telegraph poles. The three sergeants are fanning out throughout the abandoned town. We see Douglas Fairbanks Jr. playing Sergeant Ballantine, walking through the town. Everything's abandoned, nobody's around. But eventually, as British guards are being taken down silently in the background, one by one, we even get a shot of Cary Grant right here with some murderous activity going on behind him. Meanwhile, Sergeant Ballantine, aka Douglas Fairbanks Jr., is making his way to the edge of the village over here along the cliff, where he finds a whole bunch of suspicious natives in one of the buildings. One of them tries to strangle him from the back. A fight ensues. There's action, there's adventure, but luckily, Cutter and Ballantine are able to subdue their foes and drag them back towards the telegraph office, back over here towards the center of town, where the leader of the rebels, who they call Young Toadface, says they've been digging their own graves, and then suddenly shouts, "Kali! Ma Kali!" And that's how you know these aren't just any ordinary rebels. These rebels are Tuggy. The legendary Kali worshipping cult of murderers start springing up from all over the town from their hiding spots and start fighting the British. Meanwhile, from back in the hills, all these horsemen start appearing. The Tuggy are here in numbers, and all of a sudden, all through the town, you have this amazing, crazy action sequence where the British start retreating up to the rooftops. There's a gunfight, there's sword play, there are Tuggy axes being chucked back and forth between main characters. And best of all, for my money, as the action continues, the main characters just start chucking sticks of dynamite at the buildings, at the Tuggy, at anybody, blowing up whole chunks of buildings. And speaking of the buildings, although this area of the Alabama Hills is now very famous and frequented by tourists and all cleaned up by the BLM, you see it's all beautiful and natural looking out here. Once you start getting into the boundaries of Tantrapur, like I was showing you, there are nails everywhere. More and more of those clay roof tiles. There's even chunks of wood, like this one over here in the grass. And the more you look, you'll start to find all these pieces of concrete out here, including some pieces with chicken wire mesh still in them. Those are pieces of the very walls of Tantrapur. They were this chicken wire, this mesh, with thin layers of concrete applied to them, just strong enough for a building to last the length of shooting, and then left out here for more than 80 years for us to discover. We are in Tantrapur. We are in the site of this huge action sequence that no doubt inspired countless action movies that have come afterwards. Look at this right here. You see this giant slab of concrete. Here's a piece of flooring or pavement from one of the buildings. And all around it here, you got a ton of little nails and these big, massive bent construction nails that were actually used in constructing those buildings. These are vintage nails. These are not recent nails. They're not from burning pallet wood like you get at most campsites, and there are thousands of them. I mean thousands upon thousands. Every square foot of the town is riddled with nails and these pieces of concrete. You don't see them at first. You got to kind of wander through the brush to find them, but they are here. Like I keep saying, this is indeed the site of Tantrapur, and looking at it from above, you can really get a sense of just how massive the set was. It reportedly cost, at the time, in excess of $75,000 just for this village alone, and that's in 1938 dollars. Today, it costs you millions of dollars to recreate something like that. Because remember, it's not just the money that inflates, it's the cost of labor, materials, and everything. You would never get away with building something like that for 75 grand today, much less 1.5 million, which is what it's worth in today's money. And keep in mind, this is 1939 that the film was released, which means it was released the same year as Gone with the Wind, The Wizard of Oz, Stagecoach, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Well, The Wizard of Oz, Gone with the Wind, although they're classics and many of us grew up watching them and loving them of all genders, back then were really considered sort of the kids' movies, the ladies' movies. Gunga Din, this was the big, massive, huge Hollywood movie for the men, for the action lovers, for the adventurers. And as it'll become clear later on in this story, this influenced some of my favorite movies of all time, particularly Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, and it's amazing to be standing out here holding pieces of film history. Anyway, the British are retreating more and more onto the rooftops. They're chucking dynamite around, and they reach the final rooftop up here against the cliff. They've got Gunga Din, who wants to be a first-rate soldier, but they won't let him fight. They all gather together on the rooftop and begin jumping down into the river. Now, in the movie, it's obviously mannequins. It's not filmed here, let's just put it that way, because as you see, there is definitely no river going on down here, but this is where the river should be in the film. And they make their escape by the skin of their teeth and head back to the gigantic British Army outpost, which is where we are going next as well. Now, given just how much space is out here next to Tantrapur, you would think they just would have built the soldier fort, you know, kind of around the corner, around some of these rocks. Instead, it's about, what, 4 miles? 4 miles. 4 miles away. Not here in the main Alabama Hills recreation area, but over here in what is now the site of a neighborhood. And luckily, the site of the fort itself has been spared from the bulk of the construction, and it's still this barbed wired off, empty field. So our heroes escape from Tantrapur, barely escaping with their lives. We see them marching towards the fort, and look at the way you can actually see these same rock formations in the film and out here today in what's literally somebody's backyard. They're headed to the fort, and as you can see, there's nothing in this field now, but back in 1938, this was the site of the British outpost at Murray. And look at the size of that set. The whole thing was bigger than a football field. It was massive, and it's amazing to think there's nothing left of it here today. Our disheveled and wounded heroes come marching in from back over here by these rocks here, through this field, and they're surrounded by all the buildings from the fort and of course all the soldiers lined up and at attention. And then later on in the film, down towards the far end of that field where those houses are, that's where the British outpost buildings were. There's these huge, massive drilling scenes. They filmed them from big platforms 50 feet up, and there were hundreds and hundreds of extras playing Indian British soldiers. They had dozens and dozens of horses out here, and when our heroes return, of course, they discover that it was the Thuggee. They have to go and put down this rebellion, so they all come marching back out of the fort this way, and it's then you realize when they say they had 1,500 extras back then working on this movie, they were not exaggerating. I mean, look at the size of that column of soldiers marching out. It's incredible that this now desolate field once had an army marching through it, a literal army, an army of extras. Now, we are so used to seeing things like the Star Wars prequels or Lord of the Rings with all these CGI things and digital trickery with all these extra people that really isn't that impressive looking to us. But when you consider that back then, audiences had never seen that many people on screen. This was a record-breaking film. You could imagine just how mind-blowing it was to be back in the theater in 1939, and then maybe the next week go see Gone with the Wind and everything. What a time for epic films. This has been pretty fun. It's pretty easy to get to the spots from this film. I'm pretty sure this movie is on YouTube. I know it's on Apple Movies and stuff like that. Gunga Din, 1939. Go look for it. Go watch it. If you like adventure films, I think you'll really dig it. Obviously, this is a movie made in the 1930s, so it's maybe not as politically correct as some people would like today, but still, as a piece of cinema and as a historic piece of cinema, I think it's kind of a must-watch. You should check this movie out if you have the inclination. All right, so our heroes return here. The three white sergeants are telling their boss all about the Thuggee. They're discovering what's going on. Meanwhile, Gunga Din is outside. He's not a soldier, so he's not drilling with them, but he's around the corner practicing. That's where Sergeant Cutter finds him and finds out that Gunga Din has got this bugle, and he's like, I'm really supposed to take that from you. He's like, please, sir, I could be a first-rate soldier. And then, you know, out of the kindness of his heart, he lets Gunga Din do a little drilling and tells him, this is how you salute properly and all this different stuff. And they kind of form a bond, a friendship, which will be important later. And so, as the British realize they're going to battle the Thuggee, they need to repress this rebellion of this murderous cult. The three sergeants and the faithful waterboy Gunga Din get ready to march out with the British Army off in that direction and head back to Tantrapur once again. I showed you this shot before, but it's worth showing again. All right, so they head back, but back here in Tantrapur, the soldiers discover that the town is now actually abandoned. The Thuggee are nowhere to be found. So the soldiers relax, some of them start drinking, chilling, until Gunga Din finds Sergeant Cutter, played by Cary Grant, and tells him he's been exploring the surrounding area and found a temple of gold. Now in this film, Sergeant Cutter is treasure mad. He's like a proto-Indiana Jones. He goes nuts for treasure. So after borrowing an elephant from the army, him and Gunga Din saddle up and head off towards the temple. Of course, in the film, it appears they've traveled a vast distance and found what else but the good old adventure movie staple, the rickety, creaky rope bridge across the chasm. In reality, they didn't travel far at all. Tantrapur was right down there along that road. And if you look just behind me, you'll see this rock cropping to the right and this rock cropping to the left. This is where the rope bridge from Gunga Din was built. It's an old adventure movie cliche now, but the cliche pretty much started with this exact film. So you see, literally just a stone's throw away from the town. What they did was build the bridge going from this outcropping to this outcropping. They put the camera down really low to crop out the background, and then by adding a matte painting, so painting on glass in front of the camera, they replaced all this with the epic huge chasm seen in the film. Now, thanks to a shot later in the film of Thuggee going back over this bridge, I was able to line up this side of the bridge, the right side, which is right there. But even though I knew for sure they filmed it here, because it's a very famous location, it's in all the guidebooks and things, I could not for the life of me get the left side cliff to match up. I mean, look at this shot of Annie stepping out onto the bridge, the elephant, and you can see the cliff looks completely different than they do today. Yet this is certainly the other half of the bridge, because as you can see all along the face of the rock, look at these gigantic gouges in it. They're still concrete here from where they anchored the rope bridge, and I mean massive pieces, because of course they had to literally put an elephant onto this thing, right? It had to be strong, it had to be sturdy, so this was definitely the spot where Annie steps out. What solved the mystery, thankfully, is that my brother had a behind the scenes photo, and if we go back down here, just about like this, I can see that some of the rocks in the shot are lining up, and that's when I realized if you zoom in on that behind the scenes photo, you can actually tell, the keen observer can tell, that's a fake rock underneath Annie the elephant's feet. So they actually built on to this little rock cropping here a whole big extra piece to anchor the bridge, which means it all does line up. The bridge from Gunga Din was right here. This is where Gunga Din and Sergeant Cutter and Annie the Elephant made their way towards the Golden Temple. And over here on the backside, it went from right here at this point to right up here on the fake rock that was coming out. If we keep going over here, you can actually see there are still giant spikes in the ground. They were anchors for the steel cables that were hidden by rope around them to support the bridge. Look, there's one jutting out from the rock. Even today, you can see those patches of concrete. In fact, there are concrete pieces going all the way down to the ground, all the way up this, so they could build a ramp of fake rock for the elephant to walk up. And look at this, from the top, even decades and decades later, you can still see where the bridge was sort of mounted to the rocks up here. Dude, that is nuts. This is freaking amazing. We are finding pieces of cinema history left and right out here, but I have a feeling this is gonna be nothing compared to what we find at the temple. Ooh, really quick before we leave the site of the bridge, if you keep walking here towards what is actually here in real life of a cliff, we actually discovered the motherlode of Tantrapur artifacts, because of course the bridge was right here within sight of the town. And look at this. Look at this little crack leading directly from the bridge down into this wash. There's lots of other modern trash mixed in with it, lots of cans and stuff, possibly from the filming crew, but also from generations afterwards. But underneath all that, there is so much chicken wire, there is so much concrete, and almost all of what you're seeing here was from the chute of Gunga Din. Wood, metal, cans, plaster, concrete, chicken wire. I mean, I guess why clean it up when you could just push it into the ditch? Back then, this wasn't as protected as it is now. And if you're wondering why they don't just clean it up now, it may be so old that it falls under the rules of artifacts and protection, so the BLM can't even come out here and clean it up. Just like a ghost town site, they just have to leave it in situ and just leave it there to rot with the ages. Okay, I'm glad we stayed a little longer because finding the ruins of Tantrapur is freaking epic, but now it's time to hop into the Bronco and head into the unknown towards the temple. It's just a short drive up the road for us, in a Bronco at least, which by the way is much more comfortable than riding on an elephant and has better air conditioning too. All right, we found it. The turnoff to the temple. Is there anything more epic in an adventure movie than a temple? And this temple, the temple from Gunga Din, was maybe set in the coolest, most picturesque, most epic adventure-looking setting ever. This area is called the Temple Pocket, and you can tell you're in the right place because look at this historical marker. Gunga Din filmed here. It talks about the hundreds of horsemen, the thousands of extras, the tent city they all had to live in, but I don't care about any of that right now. What I care about is just what Cary Grant cared about, finding the lost temple. And there it is, the Golden Temple. Gunga Din promised Sergeant Cutter down in that valley. They were gazing on it from a cleft up high in the cliffs, but down here, this was it. The Valley of the Golden Temple. This is the most epic location for a lost temple ever. But if it's incredible now in my imagination, just imagine how much more incredible it was when the temple was here. Look at the size of that thing. That temple set was at least 60 feet tall. Now that we've seen Tantrapur, now that we've seen that they had that military camp that was as big as a football field, it all makes sense. It's on a scale with the rest of the film. But it was unbelievably huge, this temple out here. It absolutely filled this valley. You could see Seth standing out there for scale. And thanks to the help of digital technology, look at the size of that temple here. It pretty much went from wall to wall in this canyon, and it was no flat two-dimensional set. This thing was 3D and full size. It's so big that in that last shot where we see Cutter and Gunga Din entering the temple, you could see the way the temple was blocking out most of these huge 100-foot high cliff rock things. And I was just thinking to myself, imagine stumbling upon this during a break in the filming back then. And then I remembered Seth actually found photos that appear to be tourists who stumbled across the set and took a couple of pictures with it back in the day. And just looking at those old ladies there next to the temple, you can really see just how massive and intricate this thing was. Dude, this thing was insane. It cost $83,000 to build in 1938. That's even more than the entire village of Tantrapur cost. It's $2 million today, but think about it. It would cost even more than that to reconstruct this now. You're talking like $10 million to build a set like that. All right, so to continue the story, Sergeant Cutter and Gunga Din head into the temple. They're looking for gold. Just as they reach the steps of the temple, which would be right in front of us, right here, they hear a strange sound, and looking off to their left, they see coming down from the rocks here in the darkness, torch-wielding, turban-clad shapes. Who are they? What could they be? I think you already know, as they retreated deeper and deeper into the temple, which the interiors were filmed on a soundstage, they noticed the giant statue of the goddess Kali. That's right, it's the Thuggee themselves. It's the Thuggee temple. You see what I mean? The Gunga Din temple, where we are standing right now, was the original Temple of Doom, because just like Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, our heroes are going inside, they see the mysterious idol, they are suddenly surrounded by Thuggee, which by the way is where we get our modern English word thug from, so some people say Thuggee, either or, and Gunga Din and Cutter are trapped in the temple. So Cutter comes up with a distraction and lets Gunga Din escape. He runs off to find the other two sergeants, McChesney and Ballantyne, and that's when the three of them return to the temple alone, sadly without the British Army. And that's where we get our next temple money shot. For my money, the best shot of the temple in the whole film. Now this next shot was filmed from way up high here on the cliffs, and as we've seen from other behind-the-scenes photos from Gunga Din, they'd often build these elaborate wood and metal trestles up here to get the camera on top of. We obviously don't have enough wood to build a giant trestle at the moment, but we think we can get pretty darn close. Dude, that is incredible. Of course it reminds me of Disneyland and the Indiana Jones adventure, but that's the original Temple of Doom. And we're pretty darn close to where they built that platform where they filmed that shot from, the epic money shot. Anyway, we could climb up here on these cliffs for hours trying to recreate every shot perfectly, but there's no wrong angle looking down there, especially with the power of digital technology. We can pop that temple back where it belongs from any angle. So look at this, and look at this from anywhere in this valley. The Temple of Kali, the Thuggee temple, the original Temple of Doom. Now, because the other two sergeants would not listen to Gunga Din when he came to camp to get them, they didn't bring the other British soldiers with them, and they basically walked right into a trap, into the clutches of the Guru of Kali, who, by the way, was the original inspiration for the character of Mola Ram in Temple of Doom. He traps them in here, and the whole idea is that now the entire British Army is gonna come to rescue the three sergeants. They're gonna come inside of this valley, and from the rooftop of the temple where they're holding the Guru prisoner, hoping the Thuggee won't kill them, they can see from over the edge of this cliff, from the roof of the temple, and out there, past the mouth of the canyon, the British columns marching in here to the three sergeants' rescue. But in reality, there are Thuggee hiding all along these cliffs. From the roof of the temple, so somewhere up here, we see the back of this valley is full of Thuggee horsemen. The cavalry is back there. And like I said, looking back this way, looking at the entrance where everybody comes into the temple, you can see shots from the roof of the temple of these rocks up here in the center of your screen. And the whole cliffside is riddled with Thuggee troops just waiting to ambush the British. Now, the guru leader has been kidnapped by our three heroes, but he throws himself in a poisonous snake pit. Very Indiana Jones as well. And now the Thuggee have nothing to lose, so they attack the three sergeants. They're laying on top of the temple. They're bleeding. They're wounded. The British are coming. They're going to be ambushed. And, spoiler alert, that is when Gunga Din, the lowly water boy, the lowly Bisty who wants to be a soldier, picks up a bugle and sounds a call to warn the British, who form their ranks outside of the canyon. And then we see the Thuggee troops come pouring out from behind the temple. They've got to leave the canyon and face off against the British head to head in an epic final battle that, of course, was not actually filmed right here, but in a totally separate location. So before we see the final battle where the Thuggee poured out of this canyon and faced off against the British Army, let's look and see if we have any luck, like we did at Tantrapur, in finding pieces of the lost temple. Now, as you can see through the use of digital technology, this is right where the temple was. It was absolutely massive. And as it fades away, you can see now on the ground what's left of the temple area. It's all been washed out. They've built up roads here and campsites over the year. There's been some erosion, some buildup. But there's a couple of key cool little things I want you to notice behind the temple in the film against this cliff right here. Past the left side of the temple, not only can you see this very interesting cleft in the rock, a very narrow little kind of crack going up the side of the cliff, which you can see is still here today. Look at that little narrow crack with the skinny rocks going up. Got to step down into this little wash, into this little river where all this erosion has happened to come see it. Well, that can be seen in the background of some of these weird tourist photos my brother found online of people visiting the set out here. And notice at the bottom of it, at the very base of it, so kind of right down here and right up against the cliff, there was a strange little tent you could see in the film, almost like one of the Thuggees, instead of defiling the temple itself, had a little campsite outside. I love that little detail, and the fact that the back corner of the temple reached these rocks and the other corner reached almost against the rocks on the far side of the canyon means this thing was enormous. Nearly as massive as Tantrapur itself, and there's no big ravine that they could have pushed all the debris into. But look down here in the wash. At first you don't see much, right? You just see a bunch of rocks, weird white chunks of rock. Well, notice something about all these weird sandstone cliffs around us. There's no white. There's no white anywhere. Yet, down here, where all the water has washed the dirt away, what do you see? Chunks of white, and what is that? That is not a chunk of the native branches. That is a chunk of wood. Now, people have campfires down here. There's all kinds of wood, debris, but these chunks of white rock are not rock at all. Seth, grab your shovel. I think I found something. Hurry. Yalla, yalla. Look. Oh my gosh. It's still here. Whoa. Look at this. These are decorative plaster pieces from the Gunga Din temple. I thought we might find some debris, but nothing like this. And look at this. There's more everywhere. Out of the ground here in the wash, there's plaster. I mean, there are pieces everywhere of the plaster. There's concrete mixed in with the plaster. It's all buried deep down in this layer. There's wood, which I grant you, there's firewood from campsites everywhere. But look at this. Look at this concrete. The same exact wire mesh pattern, the same color, the same thickness as all of the concrete from Tantrapur. This is it. The lost Temple of Doom has been rediscovered. Keep in mind, at the time this was filmed, it was one of the biggest budgeted, most elaborate Hollywood films ever. So this set was extremely elaborate. They faced it with all different kinds of stone. They had gold up there near the roof, or at least gold leaf. And they had wood, obviously, and concrete in the interior and the construction. And then all that stone detail on the outside was all plaster sculptures. And this is interesting. I'm no archaeologist, but look down here. You have this whole layer in here, this whole strata in the wash where everything either got pushed in or washed down. And this is interesting. Just underneath a lot of this plaster and concrete is a whole layer that's very hard to see from here of charcoal, of burned wood.
And look, it's been burned. The fact that it's been burned is crazy. Oh, look, is this metal?
Wait a minute, let me see that.
These are nails.
These are rusty, look, they're
Really
encased
rusty.
in wood or something. These are rusty bolts and nails.
Look at this slate.
Oh, and that's stone. They did build or face parts of the temple with real stone.
This wasn't all just plaster.
No.
They made this out of real material, like a temple should be.
Okay, look at this. It's gonna wash away anyway, so I'm not destroying the landscape, but yeah, look at this piece of concrete here with the mesh in it. And all in it, under that layer, you've got some burned stuff. Did they burn the temple? Did they just pile it up and burn it? I mean, it's the 30s.
Why else would it be burned and buried at that same layer if it, you know?
Yeah, I've watched a lot of Discovery Channel. This is definitely suspicious. We need Tony, what's his name, from Time Team out here to do an archaeological dig. There are pieces of concrete, there are rusty bolts. You're right, I would have thought those were just pieces of wood, but they're not. These are rusted and crusted nails and bolts. They're the same kind of nails as Tantrapur. Same kind of concrete, same kind of everything.
A lot of nails over there, there's a lot of nails over here.
There's a lot of material here. It's like they just bulldozed it and pushed it down the ditch like they did with the bridge stuff.
Yeah.
This is insane. Oh, to live in the 30s. Just throw your trash out the window. Hey guys, this isn't just one little piece. It goes all down the wash. Basically under the entire footprint of the temple. You can see all these pieces have washed downstream. We've had some crazy rainstorms in California. So spoiler alert, full disclosure, Seth and I were out here a little over a year ago with my son, London, and our dad. So we were doing sort of a 3 generations thing, and we found a couple little plaster pieces right where the temple should be. We spent a long time lining up a photograph from a movie locations book with our own, view of the temple and the area. So we had a rough idea of where it was, and we knew there were some pieces, but the current rains, the recent rains, have exposed way more than we saw last time. Look at, even back here up against the cliff, look at all these concrete chunks of temple. And there must be so much more that's washed downstream. As you can see, the sun is getting pretty low over there behind the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains. These are Gunga Din artifacts. Now think of it, you already have seen the Molaram look-alike, so you know an inspired Temple of Doom, not only with the temple, but with the Tuggy cult, with the bad guy, with the rope bridge. And by the way, during the final battle, as some of the thugs are trying to escape, they're trying to go back over that bridge, and the rope bridge gets cut. So direct inspiration on Spielberg and on George Lucas. And then think of the name Gunga Din, and then think of the Star Wars prequels and the Gungans. Coincidence? I bet not. George Lucas loved this film. I happen to know Ben Burtt, the sound designer on Star Wars, a big fan of Gunga Din. This is one of a very short list of films that Rian Johnson told everybody to watch before they started filming The Last Jedi. Not that I can see the influence on that, because Gunga Din's actually a good movie. Okay, that's my opinion. So there are serious Hollywood filmmakers who have worked on countless films that inspired all of us living today, who were themselves inspired by Gunga Din. And then you know what these are? These are anchors for putting screws into plaster. These are anchors that were holding the face of the temple together. They're kind of corroded, they're busted, but that's what these are. I'm sure the Lone Pine Film Museum we saw earlier has got pieces of this set. If they don't, man, they should come out here and sneak away with some. I know they've got pieces from Tremors that was filmed out here, Star Trek V, all kinds of other movies. But Gunga Din, man. Oh yeah, definitely, look at this. You got plaster, you've got burned layer of wood, you've got plaster and concrete on top. Some or other part of this temple definitely either caught on fire, was set on fire when they were done, was set on fire afterwards, if there was just a big debris pile by hooligans. You know all those Lone Pine hooligans, Seth.
Oh, we've seen the skate park.
Yeah, look at that. You got pieces of old wire down in here. That's old metal wire. This is just, there's so much here. You could dig this up for, I don't know, months. I guess you couldn't put it back together. Humpty Dumpty is broken. I mean, plaster.
Humpty Dumpty's 85.
Yeah, it's all in little fragments. The only really cool decorative piece was that swirly piece we found earlier, And then last year, we found a piece that was definitely some kind of edge, some kind of corner piece.
Yeah, we found a corner piece.
Yeah,
That's right.
So there are definitely more decorative pieces hidden under the ground here, but are they cracked? I mean, you can see some of this plaster here is cracked to HE double hockey sticks, and you can move it, but it just crumbles away. So how many cool pieces of temple are sitting under our feet out here? And just think, that whole temple was just right here.
And this is just one corner of it. The temple was huge, so under this dirt is much more of this, surely.
I agree with you, but don't call the Temple of Kali Shirley. All right, I know Seth and I both want to dig up more temple, and honestly, I'm not gonna lie to you. I know you're supposed to leave everything, but I just want to take every piece I can find with me. Because if you actually sit there and watch the movie Gunga Din, which I only did because we figured out where it was filmed first, I'm not gonna lie to you. I saw it once when I was younger on TCM or something, thought no more about it, found out the filming locations were here, thought that was pretty neat, and I'm not gonna be a poser, pretend I was a big fan my whole life. After we found the filming locations, we watched the movie and both of us were like, this is a good movie. And then on top of that, once you see the film and realize how directly it inspired Temple of Doom, not only does it make me like Gunga Din more, it freaking makes me love Temple of Doom. I want to go back and watch Temple of Doom again now. Probably seen it 50 billion times. I've always liked that movie. I don't know why it gets all the hate.
No, it's good.
It's cool. A guy pulls out a heart out of someone's chest. It's on fire, Kalima. Look at that. There's a corner piece right there. There's a 90-degree angle piece. Anyway, you got the Tuggy Temple. You've got stranglers. You've got the rope bridge, the chasm. You've got the creepy abandoned village where something went wrong.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, am I describing Temple of Doom or am I describing Gunga Din? Anyway, our three heroes are stabbed. They are wounded. They are stuck on top of the temple, which is right here. Meanwhile, the British are outside of the canyon battling the Tuggy. Gunga Din has sounded the horn, but he has been stabbed by some of the Tugs. And so because the sun is going down, we are going to have to leave the Temple Canyon here and head to the scene of the last battle, which is back more towards Tantrapur, more towards the Alabama Hills, a recreation area proper, and see what we can see of the final fight. But for my money, this is the most epic spot that you can visit, this little temple pocket, and you can actually camp right where the Bronco is. I'm sure you've seen these vans in the background. These people showed up while we were filming. That is a sick camping site. You can camp right at the Temple of Kali. We're saying goodbye. We're taking one last look at the epic temple of Gunga Din here as it fades away into wreckage and into history. And now Seth and I have got to saddle up the Bronco and head towards the final battle. Remember, the Tugs have poured out of this canyon. They're now facing off against the British. And you'd think they would have just filmed that stuff, the battle, right here at the mouth or the entrance to the temple slot, where, by the way, they filmed another shot from Gunga Din where all the torches are coming down the hill, the big hill. This guy up here, what's it called, Rattlesnake Hill?
I think it's Rattlesnake Hill.
But the main battle, that's down this road, another 2 or 3 miles back near Tantrapur at a place called Ruiz Hill. And this is Ruiz Hill, somewhere in front of us right here. And these are where the final battle scenes were filmed. Now I'm gonna leave GPS coordinates for Tantrapur, for the temple, for everything in the video description, or I'll leave a link to them. But right here, we're just off of Whitney Portal Road, which is the main road down to Lone Pine, California, and the 395 here on the eastern side of the Sierras. So the production company, RKO, would have had buses bringing all of the extras out here. There were thousands of them, so many Tuggy Soldier extras. They didn't have enough costumes for all of them and had to run into the town and go to every store and buy every kind of white linen they could. They had to borrow bed sheets from their base camp over here, which was this massive base camp tent city where all the extras lived, where the elephants were housed. The final battle was so epic and so huge, and included hundreds of horses, by the way, that it would take hours or maybe even days to find every shot from the final battle. But of course, with the sun going down, we won't sport with your patience and get straight into some shot for shot comparisons. You can see here this big cleft, this big ravine This is where much of the battle takes place. Most of the British troops are coming from this way for most of the shots. And behind Seth, we got all kinds of tuggy horsemen coming from this direction. But let's get into it. See where Seth is pointing the camera? You can see all kinds of tuggy troops get massed up on Ruiz Hill over here, and they are coming for the British. They're shooting, they're riding horses. And then we'll line another shot up here of the horsemen charging from Ruiz Hill up towards where we're standing up here, up towards the camera, all crazy. And I want you to imagine that every hill, every boulder, every cliff, every valley here was crawling with extras, was crawling with British soldiers, was crawling with Tuggy extras. There were shots filmed back over the mountains near Tantrapur. There were some shots filmed back towards the temple pocket, but mostly it was this whole area along Whitney Portal Road near Ruiz Hill was just massive, massive battle scenes. I'm telling you guys, when you're standing here in real life, you realize just how insane it must have been to have that many people running around here. And it makes the film that much better. The film is cheap to buy on like iTunes. I think it's on YouTube. I'm sure you can still buy the DVD on Amazon. It's not expensive. Totally worth the money, totally worth watching. And this is only 4 hours from Disneyland, where I live, basically. 4 hours to get up here. It's a great day trip. There's campsites, a great overnight trip. Bring the family, explore Gunga Din. It's epic. All right, you see here, Seth has lined up another shot of the Tuggy charging down the hill. They're charging down from Ruiz Hill, down into that little ditch, that little gully that we saw from up on top of the cliffs. Imagine hundreds of horses charging through this canyon. It's rocky. There's not one patch of even ground here. This was a dangerous shoot for man and beast.
You can see why they picked this shot, because you have the nice S-curve of coming down the hill and the background and the levels, but then just that whole S washes out in
yeah, the black and white.
This black and white.
Not do it justice.
80 years later, not from an original film.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a lot more beautiful in 4K, in HD, on our modern devices. Okay, back there behind Ruiz Hill, Seth got this great shot of when the British were coming up this gully from the other side, where the British army formed up to attack the Tugs. And now we're going up on this cliff here, back up there. It's hard to match this shot exactly, but if I hold the camera up on a pole, we get a pretty good approximation of where the elephants rolled up with the British. And what's that on their backs? Cannons? No, not quite. Something even better, something even faster at mowing the Tuggy down. We're gonna bring the Bronco up here on top of the cliff. I'm gonna stand on it, and then you will see what the elephants were carrying. And again, sticking the camera high up in the sky, we'll get a close match on the shot of the elephants' Gatling guns mowing down the enemy. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we don't have giant camera platforms, but thank goodness we had the Bronco parked on the edge of the cliff and a Seth willing to climb on top of it to get those sick money shots. All right, well, as you can see, the sun has gone down. That was an epic battle scene filmed here. It was an epic movie filmed here. And we had an epic adventure searching for the lost original Temple of Doom, now rediscovered. And of course, the filming locations from Gunga Din. I highly recommend the movie. If you're okay with old, a little bit outdated movies, black and white, I highly recommend coming out here to the Alabama hills and checking out the filming locations and walking on cliffs and climbing up rocks like a mountain goat. It's a heck of a lot of fun. Thank you guys for watching. I just want to remind you, I have a new book out, Tales from Random Land. If you'd like to pick up a copy, go to randomland.com. There's links to everything else there too, sick hats and sick merch. I want to thank my brother, Seth, for coming all the way out here and lining up all these shots and doing digital special effects. You know what? We've done our duty, just like Gunga Din, who, by the way, to tell you about the end of the movie, he has died at the temple. But he has saved the British. And that's when the 3 white British sergeants realized that the lowly Gunga Din was actually a better man than they. Just food for thought. He's done his duty, and now I've done mine. We can go home and sleep well. They cut the rope bridge, but I managed to climb all the way up. Those tuggy can't stop me. I'm just kidding. There's Seth being artistic back there. He's shooting a cactus flower. He's taking a picture of it. He's like, we gotta hurry. The sun is going down. We gotta hurry. We gotta get the epic final battle scenes. And then he's like, ooh, hold on. I gotta get this cactus flower. He's concentrating. Don't distract him! Kali! Ma Kali! Kali! He loves that. He loves when I do that. It's his favorite thing. Ah! Just kidding, I wasn't on a cliff. Ha ha, fooled you, Mom. Oh, lizard, don't leave. Hashtag making a video problem. Seth had to ask these nice rock climbers to move their car. Look how nice they're being. I wanted to give them money, but I forgot I don't have any money. Ugh. Side note, it's pretty funny how you can see all these buildings in the background behind Gunga Din or over the edge of the cliff. Those are actually scale models. Those are only a few feet high, and they're just put back there to give the illusion of Tantrapur having some outskirts. Anyway, pretty cool side note, huh? All right, moving on. There's the mountain goat, Seth. Behind the scenes, Seth. Behind the scenes, Seth. By the way, that first temple reveal shot is actually way at the beginning of this canyon, at the beginning of the temple slot. You have to back way far up. The one where Cary Grant and Gunga Din are looking down at the temple right when you first see it in the film. Well, the only way you can see it is in the rooftop shot where Gunga Din's blowing his horn. You can see there's this big spire in the background that today is missing. Well, that was right here in front of us. And it took us forever to figure this out. But if you come all the way back to the entrance into the temple pocket and come up on this hill, looking down into the slot or into the temple pocket where the temple would be, right where that car is at the moment, this is where Cary Grant and Gunga Din were. This boulder on the right is still there. It's a very high contrast shot. This rock wall on the right was still there. And on the left would be those tall rocks that have since been demolished. And we don't honestly know if it fell over naturally and they had to move it out of the way, or if they had to move it because they were widening the road or what. But there used to be a big spire right here, and this was the shot from Gunga Din. If we adjust the contrast and all that stuff, all the boulders in the foreground match up. There's even this spot where there's two little rocks under a big rock. Well, today there's only one little rock under that round section. I thought, where's the other one? And then I realized it's right down here, just rolled down the hill at some point. Oh yeah, that's a loosey-goosey rock, and I'm gonna put it back. All right, well, it's eroded a little bit as it tumbled down the hill, so it's not as big, but there we go. I've restored the Gunga Din location. Actually, now that I just restored that, Seth pointed out something, that right where the tall spire of rock would have been, we see all kinds of ancient wire right here. We see concrete, and it looks very much like where they built the suspension bridge, meaning the missing rock, the big tall spires, could have been a fake rock.
It's a fake rock.
Could have been a fake rock. We'll never know. Unless the Motion Picture Academy lets us into the director's archives, which I doubt is going to happen. So, if Ben Burt, if you're watching, help us.
If you know somebody. That's what this was. They built the anchor around this thing.
Well, they built something onto it. Other movies were filmed here, but certainly Gunga Din was the biggest. They could have built a fake rock.
There's a nail right there.
Fake rock.
80-year-old nail.
Camera Seth. 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 Gunga Seth. Gunga Seth. Jurassic Seth, Gunga Seth, Seth Seth, Seth Seth, Seth Seth, Seth Seth, Sethy Seth Seth. Oh, trying to make me look shorter, eh? This is always weird, putting your shoulder up somebody's armpit, but it's fine.
Okay, one of those will
You
work.
smell fine, it's fine, everybody's fine.